Welcome to the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner. This week's episode is sponsored by Lauren and Michael Mandelstam and family in honor of their brothers, Rabbi Rafi Mandelstam and Rabbi Yoni Mandelstam, for all of the Torah that they teach their Talmidim in TABC and the Teaneck and Fairlawn communities. And in honor of Rabbi Shalom Rosner for his tireless devotion to spreading Torah to all of Klal Yisrael. May our learning be as close for our Chayalim and all of Klal Yisrael.
Okay, we start the Malacha of Bishul, the first of the Malachos. Last time we discussed introduction, but now we start Bishul. And again, we are in the Tzurba Hilchot, the volumes, the whole set is the Lax Family Edition, and we are in the last shiur number 7 of volume number 17, the Parrots Family Edition, and we will be starting on page 295, shiur number 7, the Av, Malacha, and Tolda of Bishul. We're going to do some rules and regulations of Bishul B'Shabbos, as we had introduction to the Malacha, all Malachas last time, but we'll have some rules and regulations. Not all. Bishul will take us a couple of weeks, being it's one of the most crucial and widespread, but finite, right? We want us to know about Bishul Daraisa, Bishul Darabanan. Today we'll be discussing one of the shiurim relating to Bishul Daraisa that is nothing to do with how to place food on a heat source before Shabbos, returning food on Shabbos. Those are all within the world of Isurei D'Rabbanan, Shehiyah, Hachzara, Hatmana. We'll Bez Hashem get to that, but right now we have rules and regulations of Bishul B'Shabbos. So here we go. Says the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Gimel and Masechah Shabbos tells us the list of malachos, and what it says in the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Gimel is ofeh, baking. So when we look in the Gemara talks about, is it baking or is it cooking? Is it ofeh or is it bishul? So the Gemara says in source number 1, Shabbos Ayin Daled, Amar Papa, Shavak Tana Didan Bishul Samamanim Davi B'Mishkan. The Tana left over, did not mention bishul, the cooking of the dyes that were in the Mishkan. V'nakat ofed, it says baking. Why does it say baking? Right? Bishul was what was in the Mishkan. Again, what was in the Mishkan mean? That's a machlokas rishonim, Rav Haigon and Rashi in Shabbos. I think that's Sadi Beis or so. We paskin. What does it mean? Dumya de Mishkan, as we discussed last time. Dumya de binyan ha Mishkan, not dumya de avodas ha Mishkan. The malachos are learned out from the actions that were done in the building of the Mishkan. So they used to soak and cook dye in order to color the curtains. That's in terms of the binyan HaMishkan, and that's what the Gemara says. Why does the Mishnah say ofeh when it could have just said bishul? So the Gemara says, Tana didan sidur de pas nakan. The Gemara says because our Tana wants to give you a mnemonic, a way to remember the first 11 malachos. They are called sidur de pas, the order of bread. And it goes from you plow, and then you seed, and then you reap, you cut, you harvest, and you dash, and zorah, all the malachas, ending up with number 11, and that is ofeh, because ofeh is when we bake bread. But it's the same malacha. Ofeh and bishul are the same malacha daraisa, and that is what the Rambam says in source number 2. Echada ofeh esapach ze'o hamevashel esamacha, whether somebody bakes bread, what we call dry heat, or mevashel esamacha, somebody cooks os esamanim, or somebody cooks dyes, or mechamim eshamayim, hakol inyan echadu. It is all one inyan. That is the malacha of Bishul B'Shabbos. And again, we're going to talk about a number of the definitions of Bishul D'Oraisa this week, but hold on, we'll have to get to the next choveret, the next sefer, to get some of the Bishul D'Rabbanans. But again, what is the definition of Bishul? Definition of Bishul, fashioning foods, affecting foods, or not foods, materials, foods are an example, but even non-foods, through the mechanism using heat. Using heat, it has to be heat. If it's not, there's no heat, there's no bishul. But through the use of fire, altering the consistency of a material, as it says on page 296, softening hard things, hardening soft things, all of that is included in bishul. The Rambam gives many examples in Parak Test in source number 3. If somebody melts metal, or somebody heats metal, until it becomes like coal-like, and burning hot. Harizet toldos mevashel. That is a tolda mevashel. Remember, tolda and av in Hilchos Shabbos are both daraisa. The difference is, babakama dav beis, Hilchos karbanos. Hilchos karbanos, there's a difference, but for our purposes, avos and toldos are both daraisa. Unlike shvius. By Shemitah, avos are daraisa and toldos are darabanan, but for Shabbos, avos and toldos are both daraisa. And the Rama continues with other examples. Hamemases es hadunag, o es achilif. Somebody melts something solid. O as a zephes vakover vagofris, pitch tar, that is a tolda of mivashel v'chayev. V'chenem mivashel klei adama, achiyasu cheres, chayev mishum mivashel. Somebody cooks a earthenware vessel to make it hard. So it doesn't matter, hard, soft, it's altering the properties of an item through the source of heat. That's the definition of bishul. As the Rambam ends off, source number 3, Perek Tes, klalo shel davar, bein sheripa guf kasha ba'esh, o shehiksha guf rach hareza chayiv mishum mevashal. That is bishul. Bishul da'araisa. So what is the definition in terms of what's the measure? What's the measure of bishul da'araisa? So there's a major difference between solids and liquids. Solids we'll have to get to in a future shiur. When is bishul da'araisa? And a little bit later, actually in this year as well, there's going to be different measures because you measure cooking things and the property is different for a solid food and for liquid. So first we discuss liquid. What's the shiur for liquid? Easy. Easy or not easy? The Gemara says, what's the shiur? Yatso ledispo. Yatso ledispo, that's the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Mem, in source number 4. Atana Rabbanan, says the Gemara on page 297, right here. Maybe Adam Kito Maya Manicho Kenegana Madura. A person could bring a bottle of cold water, and put it near a flame. Lo bishvil sheyechamu, ela bishvil shetavik seidasan, to take out some of the cool, take out some of its chill. Take out some of its chill. We'll have to get back to that. Or Rabbi Yehuda Omer Bivia Isha Pakshel Shemen, oil. Umanich Zaknagana Madura. Whether it's water, whether it's oil, you can leave it there. Lo b'shvil sheyavashel, not that it should be cooked. Ela b'shvil sheyafasher, but it should be lose its coolness. V'chulu, but continue. What's important for us now? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda the Amora, who was a Talmud of Rav and then later a Talmud of Shmuel. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Echad Shemen v'echad Mayim, Yad Soledes bo Aser. If I take a liquid and make it into whatever temperature Yad Soledisbo is, which literally means the hand will recoil. It's so hot that if I touch it, my hand will recoil. So that is an Issa Daraisa. If I go from pre-Yad Soledisbo to more than Yad Soledisbo, that is Bishul Daraisa for liquids on Shabbos. What if I don't get the Yad Soledisbo? That's not Issa Daraisa. That's not also daraisa. If it's not Yasol Ledispo. What is a hand recoiling? So the Gemara gives another way to describe it. Amar Rachava, Kol Shekreso Shel Tinok Nichves. If a baby's belly will be scalded, that is Yasol Ledispo. So how hot is that? So that's a major discussion in the Achronim. How do you determine what Yasol Ledispo is? Do you go just by like what a person could do it himself and measure himself? Oh, this is, I can withstand this heat. Sometimes some people could withstand higher levels of temperature than others. So we have to have some type of objective shiur. So Shlomo Zalman says, if you look in the continuation, Shlomo Zalman says that it's no more than 45 degrees Celsius, 130 degrees Fahrenheit, the body temperature of a duck. Well, how do we say that? But where does that come from? So Shlomo Zalman in this tshuva in source number 5, Chelek Aleph Siman Sadi Aleph, which is a long tshuva, all about different issues of bishul. Pasteurization is one of the elements that he talks about, and he says the Gemara says that the neck of a bird, of a duck, is not boiling. So that's what we know is not. So a little bit hotter than that. So you have to know what the body temperature of a duck is. And a drop more than that, you have to be choshesh already. Yasol Ledispo. So that's what he discusses. Nirlani as daiti, raya brura, da'an arba'im v'chamish malo Celsius, up until 45 degrees Celsius, which is pretty hot. Ein lachish lachal sheyasol Ledispo, gam bidaraisa, up until less than 45 degrees Celsius. That you don't have to worry about for Yad Soledispo, which is 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Shari nechluku amarai beGemara, because the Gemara in Chulin talks about in beis hashchita tzonin or roseach, whether the neck of a duck is cold or hot. V'yafil mandara beis hashchita roteach Sham begamar vor begamar shein tzakin bolea el begamar shmita derag azro seach. So he continues based on that Gemara, and he says bismanenu yaduo first time. It's known, says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, sheshir midas achom shel barvaz chaluk b'bnei adam. The body temperature of a duck is different than the body temperature of a human being. Midas hachom shel barvaz bari hu karav la'arba'im v'chamish malos, 45 degrees. V'hadam hayotze mi beis hashchita ola lefachos malachas, goes up 1 degree. Goes up 1 degree, at least 46. Ukshuchola ola achom lefachos shtei malos, and if it's ill, even 2. V'kiva dachazina begamara de b'shas kamar shchita chayim tfei, and since it's right, it's very live. Afilu hachi kamelam shutzonu. We paskin is cold, so muchach up until arba'im v'shmona malos is considered sonin. But he says maybe barvazim lo chayim mitfei b'shashchita. So Shlomo Zalman says it's set by that measurement. Anything less than that is considered cold. So Shlomo Zalman says less than 45 degrees Celsius is not yad soledis bo. This is accepted by Shlomo by the Shmir Shabbos. As he usually does. Again, it's not in front of you, but the Shmir Shabbos in Perek Aleph of Bishul, of the Malacha of Bishul, which is Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph, he says, Shir hachom le'inyin nisr Bishul, but there are klal hachom shi'atzo ledis bo dahainu, lo pachos me'arboim v'chamesh malos Celsius. Right, that's where Shlomo Zalman is quoted in the Shmir Shabbos at the beginning of Hilchos Shabbos. The Ar Letzion or B'tzion HaBishol, he thinks it's a little less. 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, that's enough to scald the baby's belly. He says, just do the math. Or not do the math, do the Metzius. Right, he quotes this day of Rav Shlomo Zalman. V'nei gadol echad ratza lochiach, in source number 6. Sha'ad arba'im v'chamish malos, vade enocheshe yatzol edesbo. Right, it's up until 45, he says, Rav Shlomo Zalman felt. V'anias dadi enirakin, I don't think so. De'ech efshar lahachish hamuchash. How can one be machish? How can you contradict what you see? Shekreso shotinok nifles, b'amar malos. Even the 40 degrees. Right, where do we have achush machish before? We had that once before, a couple of weeks ago. The Gra used that against Rabbeinu Tam. When we spoke about Zmani Hayom, the Gra says, how could it be that it's still daytime? Right, it's pitch black outside. Hachush machish. So it's the same idea that the Or Letzion here says against Shlomo Zalman. Ech efshar lahachish hamuchash. You know that the baby of the belly of a teenager is going to be scalded even less. And therefore he doesn't like it. So that is second. Where Moshe Feinstein says that Yatzal Edesbo could be anywhere. He's not sure. Anywhere between 110 degrees Fahrenheit, 160, somewhere between 43 and 70. So Rav Shlomo Zalman, Rav Moshe Feinstein says in source number 7 in the Igros Moshe, Me'aroi lahachmir kim dumani b'shir kuf yud. 110, hukvar chom gadol sheish lachash yatzol edesbo, which is less. It's still hot. It's still very hot. And you have to be choshesh. This is a shash of a daraisa. We don't want to mess around. So once it's going to be in the range of yatzol edesbo, we do not fool around and we don't go near it. There is a major machlokas rishonim between Rashi and Tosfos. Am I allowed to put liquid? Right. So what did we just say? Bishul daraisa by a liquid is going from less than Yatzol Edesbo to Yatzol Edesbo. So if I cook something on Shabbos, a liquid, am I allowed to, Rashi and Tosfos Machlokas, am I allowed to put a liquid in a place where it could get to Yatzol Edesbo, but I'm gonna take it off before it gets to Yatzol Edesbo? Am I allowed to do that? Is there a gzeira I might forget? Machlokas Rashi Tosfos. Tosfos says there's no gzeira. We don't find Xera, so you don't have to make up your own Xeras. Tosfos on Shabbos Daf Memches in source number 8 on page 300. V'nira l'Rashba. Tehad Sharina lases kiton shel mayim kineged amedura hainu berachok min amedura. I'm sorry, I flipped it. Tosfos says that it is usher. Tosfos says that it's usher. Berichok ben amadura shalom lo yuchalav l'idei mechshol. You're only allowed to put it next to a heat source where it will never get to Yatzal Edesbo. So it will never come to Bishul. Avo bakarov usher afilu lahavshir. But if it's in a place where it could get to Yatzal Edesbo, one is not allowed to put it there, even just to cool and make it lukewarm. Dilma mishtali va'asilanichan shamachi yispashal. Because maybe you'll forget, and you might leave it there while it is up until when it's mavashal. That's Tosfos. The Ran quotes, he thinks b'shem Rashi that there is no such gzera. Source number 9, Nira midvarav shafilu kar l'madura mamish b'makam aray lavashal mutter. It's still okay, but we're machmir l'chadchila. The Shulchan Aruch says, source number 10, Shulchan Aruch, Shin Yud Ches. Shin Yud Ches is the siman about Bishul. We sort of started with that. Shin Yud Ches is Bishul. Shin Yud Tes is Boer. Shin Yud Tes. So we're in Shin Yud Ches Yud Dalet. Mutuli Tokidol Shamayim, Oshar Mashkim, and Kegada Eish, Lafik Sinasa. I'm allowed to put something near a heat source to get rid of the chill. Ubelvachi name Rachok Me'aish. As long as they put it far from the fire, I cannot put it in a place where it could get to Yasoledispo. So again, let's say you take something out of the fridge. You want to put it on the counter next to the hot plate. So maybe that'll get a little warm, but it's never going to get to Yasoledispo, assuming, and therefore that's mutter. But to put it somewhere where is going to get the Yasoledispo, that's a problem. Aval aser lekarvu eleish l'makam she'achol eschamim shedei Yasoledispo. V'afilu aniach bo shaktana, even just a little bit. Shetavik sinaso aser, that's an issur d'Rabbanan. Kivan sheyachol is basal sham. That's based on Tosfos. The Shulchan Aruch says I'm not allowed to put something in a place where it could get the Yasoledispo, even if I'm going to remove it before. There is one important point in Lumdis. Interesting. The Gemara in Chulin tells us that one shouldn't do netilas yadayim with boiling hot water. Why not? Because Rashi's lashon there is it loses its status. Batlu v'nishtanu mitoras mayim. Wow, that's a little lumdis. Not just Yatsoledisbo is an issue of cooking, but Yatsoledisbo, that it's a different shame. It's a different shame of an object, right? It goes from cold water to chamin. Chamin is a different shame, and maybe that's part of the lumdis of why Yatsoledisbo is the shiur for cooking. Yisod number 1 in Bishul in liquids. Yatsoledisbo is the shiur. Number 2 Yisod. We say part of the definition is cooking in fire. Cooking in fire, that's part of the definition of Bishul. What about cooking in the greatest ball of fire in the world, which is the sun? So the sun is fire, but it's a different kind of fire, as we know. It's not like regular fire that we create. So is one allowed to cook in fire on Shabbos? Is that part of, in the sun? Is that Bishul Daraisa? Is that Bishul Darabanan? Is that Mutter? So if you look in the Mishnah in Shabbos, the Mishnah in Shabbos seems to say that this is a machlokes tanoim. Seems to say. The Mishnah in Shabbos in the third parak tells us, in source number 11, okay, you can't cook an egg next to a hot water urn. Do not crack open an egg to cook on a handkerchief that was heated in the sun. Rabbi Yossi says, no, it's mutter to do that. So it sounds like it's machlokas about cooking in the handkerchief, but maybe that's machlokas whether you can cook in the sun or not. Says the Gemara, no. Everybody agrees that cooking in the sun is mutter. Cooking in the sun is mutter midaraisa. The machlokas is whether cooking in something heated by the sun. Shemesh is mutter. Toldos shemesh, machlokas, whether that's asur d'Rabbanan or not. That might be asur d'Rabbanan because toldos shemesh, atu toldos eish. I'm not allowed to cook with something that was heated by the fire. Let's say I have hot water that I cooked. If I put a little bit of cold water into the hot water, that's bishul. We're going to talk about kli rishon, kli sheni, kli shlishi, but cooking in something that was heated by fire could be also daraisa on Shabbos. So cooking in something that was heated by the sun, that might be confused with cooking with something that was heated told us eish, and that's why that might be a issa drabanan, and the other sheet that says no. Right? There's no. So that's what the Gemara says in Shabbos Lamates in source number 13. Amar of Nachman. Bechama kuli amalo pligi deshari. Everybody agrees that cooking in the sun is mutter on Shabbos. But told us or cooking in something that was heated by fire. Kuli amalo pligi deshari. Everybody agrees that's also usher. The machlokas is toldos chama. Cooking in something that was heated by the sun. That's a machlokas. Mar savar gazrina told us chama. Atu told us or. One says that we're gozer. Mar savar lo gazrinan. We're not gozer, right? And this is an example. They say yafe koach ha'av mikoach yafe koach ha'ben mikoach ha'av, because here the toldas shemesh might be asur d'Rabbanan, even though shemesh itself is mutter, right? That's the son is greater than the sun in a sense. Okay, so what's the issue? Why would it be mutter to cook in the sun? Why is that mutter? So Rashi has 4 words. Rashi says, Shabbos Lamites, source number 14, De'ein derech bishula bakach. It's not the derech. It's not the derech to cook in the sun. So what does that mean? Is Rashi telling us a practical issue or a fundamental definitional issue? That is the machlokes that's mentioned. Again, we find cooking in the sun not being bishul in other areas of halacha too. Right? If you look in the Shabbos, and we'll get back to our question. Look in the Gemara in Psachim, Daf Mem Aleph. You have it there, the next source regarding bishul by Karban Pesach. Right? There are many different halachas for bishul. There's bishul of Karban Pesach. It has to be roasted. It can't be cooked. Right? It has to be ki'im sli'esh rosh al krav al kirbo. So if you cook it, so what if you cook it in the sun? What if you cook it in a chame tferia, which is considered heated by the sun? So what exactly does ein derech bishul bakach mean? So the Eglei Tal says, and this is an important Eglei Tal, he says this in his Akdama too. You have it there in source number 16. The Eglei Tal, remember, is the Sachat Shavar. It's the Avnei Nezer. The Avnei Nezer. He wrote the Eglei Tal on the first number of Malachas. He finished them, and the rest of Malachas are in the Avnei Nezer, but Eglei Tal is Hilchot Shabbos. He writes in the Hakdama there that the doctor said that he had to take a break from giving shiurim, so he felt very bad. How could he teach? So he's like, okay, I'm going to start writing. And that's why we have an Eglei Tal. So there he develops the idea of two halachas of shinui. One is shinui in the Maisa, where the result is exactly the same, and the shinui is just in how it's done in the Maisa, where we discussed last time. Shinui is one of the outgrowths of Malechas Machshavas. Right? Misasek, Makalkel, Shinui, Grama. So Shinui, you have to do it in a regular way, not Shinui. So it says the Eglei Tal. There's Shinui in the Maisa, meaning I did it differently, but the result is the same. Or there's also Shinui in the Nif'al, in the result. Because I did it differently, or I used a different mechanism, the result is not the same quality. Says the Eglei Tal, that's what cooking in the sun is. Cooking in the sun, it's a shinui in the nif'al, and that's where there's not even an issa d'Rabbanan. By regular shinui, there's still an issa d'Rabbanan. By a shinui in not just the maisa, but a shinui in the nif'al, in the result, you don't achieve the same quality of result because you did it in a different way, in an unusual way, so that is going to be mutter. Says the Eglei Tal. Source number 16. He quotes Rashi. The bechama atzma what the bishul bakach v'yesh la'ayin the b'shabes hanaaseh shalo kedark al kapanim midrabanan aser. But if it's ein derech bishul, so then why isn't it still aser d'Rabbanan? Right? Shinui kashan Rashi, it'd still be aser d'Rabbanan, even though it's not aser d'Oraisa. So says the Eglei Tal, no, because this is a different, more fundamental type of shinui. Ach birurin shal dvarim yesh chiluk beinim yesh shinui b'hanaaseh. Oh, hashinu hu rak beha oseh. Right? Is the shinui in what occurred? Right? The result, what you achieved, or just in the ma'aseh itself? Me'ata mavashel b'chama kivan sheishvach eitzim bepas v'tavshil ukshebishal be'esh yeshevach eitz batavshil v'hu shina lavashel b'chama, which is a shinui and it's felt in the result. Says the Eglei Tal, hamavashel b'chama kivan sheishini b'nifal mutter l'chadchila. If it's just a shini b'maisa, that's still aser d'Rabbanan, but shini b'nifal is mutter l'chadchila. Rosh Shlomo Zalman is not so happy about this Eglei Tal because after all, what if you heated water in the sun? You'll be able to tell the difference. Give it to somebody to drink. You can't tell the difference if something was heated, boiling in the sun or in fire. So who says there's a shinui b'nifal? I don't think there's a shini b'nifal. And that's where Shlomo Zalman says here in the Shulchan Shlomo. He says, when Rashi says ein derech bishul, why is that mutter? No, you don't have to come on to the shinui, the mais, and the nifal. Shlomo Zalman says, because by definition, bishul requires a fire that we create. Human fire, not the sun. It's fundamental. Ein derech bishul makach means there's no bishul. It can't be bishul in the sun. It doesn't matter what the result is. It's not called the definition of bishul. Afal Pi says Shlomo Zalman. Shirashi Kasav Verakira Taima Deshari Bachama Shein Derech Bishul. What does he mean by that? Mikomakom Nira Sheikir Hatam Hu. Now on page 305. Mishum Deklalahu Deleka Bishul Ki'im Ba'esh Vitol Dato V'lo B'davar Acher. Bishul is fire. That's the definition of bishul. It doesn't matter what the normal way of heating things up in. It's fire. And you don't have fire, and that's it. That's it. It's not going to be usser. And don't tell me because Ein Lomar, he says towards the end, it doesn't work so well unless except with fire. What about water? So therefore, you don't tell me that it has to do with the nifal. So this is crucial. According to Rashi, again, ein derech bishul bakach. Why is that? The ugly tal says because the result is different. And Rosh Shlomo Zalman says, no, because the maisa is different. The maisa is ein derech bishul. That is what we hold. This brings us to a major machlokas about cooking in a microwave. Cooking in a microwave on Shabbos. So you shouldn't cook in a microwave. But let's say for a chola. Let's say you have to cook in a chola. Is it better to put a pot on the fire? Is it better to cook in a microwave? Is that better? Rav Moshe assumes ein derech bishul literally is not a definitional like Rav Shlomo Zalman said. Rav Moshe has a true about cooking in microwaves, and Rav Moshe Feinstein says it could be asur daraisa. It's asur. It's normal. Rashi says ein derech bishul because if the normal way to cook is in fire, and I choose not to cook in fire in the sun, that makes it at most derabanan and maybe mutter. But Rav Moshe says if your choice, this is not a secondary choice. This is the ikar choice. You want to cook in a mechanism, in a machine that doesn't use fire, right? A microwave oven does not have fire. It somehow cooks the food from within itself, right? That's why sometimes you have some types of parts of the food. Some are boiling hot, some are still frozen. So says Rav Moshe, it's a normal way of cooking. And Rav Moshe writes in the Tshuva, this is written decades ago. He says, I know not everybody has a microwave now, but I think everybody is going to have a microwave because it's a very easy way to cook, and I think Rav Moshe says that it could become daraisa. But Bishul b'chama, he says, you might say it's all mutter and daraisa. Says Rav Moshe, I argue. V'im kain towards the bottom. Ba'microwave oven shetov lavashel kamo ba'esh mamish. It's just as good as cooking in mamish fire. Ve'ilu sheyesh b'em taner kazeh. If people have this, shemishtam shebo yoser mi bishul da'esh. People will use this even more than fire. Why hasn't this spread so much? Because people just don't have them yet. And Rav Moshe is a Navi. Everybody's going to use them because it's so easy. And therefore says Rav Moshe, Vaday yesh lemelef mi bishul da'ar da'haya b'mishkan. Chashiv is told it's going to be daraisa. Rav Shlomo Zalman, on the other hand, what we saw before, Shlomo Zalman says no, it's definitional to bishul. You need fire. If you don't have fire, it's not bishul. Doesn't matter how common it is. Rashi doesn't mean ein derech bishul b'kach is not common. No, it means this is not the derech of bishul with sun. So even if you cook in the sun all the time, it's still not going to be daraisa. Still not going to be daraisa. Shlomo Zalman discussed this. He writes with a Chazon Ish about electricity. Shlomo Zalman says the Chazon Ish told him he thought it was asur daraisa for the electrical currents, and Shlomo Zalman said I never understood it, and I still don't understand it. And that's why Lamaisa Machlokas HaPoskim about cooking in a microwave on Shabbos. Rav Yitzchak Yosef says Lamaisa. If somebody needs to cook on Shabbos for a chola, better to use a microwave because at least you have some shitas that say it is derabanan. It is derabanan. Related to this also is a discussion about dud shemesh, about solar water heating systems. Right, that is a big discussion in the poskim. So how does it work? Because when I get the hot water, is that called shemesh? Is that called toldos shemesh? So many say that might be called shemesh, but the problem is that there's cold water that goes in when I open the faucet and I take the hot water. Then cold water goes in and gets heated by the hot water. So the hot water is heated by that. So that's not shemesh. The original water might be shemesh, but then the cold water going in is toldo shemesh, and therefore says the Shmir Shabbos. Says the Shmir Shabbos in source 21 on page 309. Ubikar din bishul b'shemesh yesh layein dulai bezman hazeh k'shemefikim chom mikoach hashemesh yishbokam lesser bishul. Well, first of all, he says, well, maybe related to what we just said from Rav Moshe, by microwaves that it becomes normal, and therefore you don't say ein derech bishul. So to here. It's normal to, in many areas, to heat water like this, and therefore this could be just like the microwave. It could be bishul daraisa. In Rashi, he quotes the Rashi that we saw before. Mashma the kol shederech bishula b'kach yishmakom lesser. So it could be a problem, and therefore would that be a problem? So he quotes here that many poskim say that it is not prohibited daraisa. Maybe it could be mutter in certain ways, but it could be that. Is not so simple, especially Minchas Yitzchak says, so number one, we said before, it could be usher because it's derech nowadays. Number two, it's heated by the water. So that's told a shemesh, and that would also be usher. Rasi Pesach, again, years ago said maybe it's mutter because it's derech grama. It's grama and a derabanan, a grama of a derabanan, trade derabanan, and therefore the Hartzvi says in source 23, maybe it's mutter. Benito didan lo aviel grama unihisha grama asura kalpanami derabanan, even though it's a derabanan, but here with the idea of ein derech bishul, and he might hold like the Rabbi Shlomo Zalman, put that all together, maybe it's mutter. Shmiur Shabbos changed his mind. In the original Shmiur Shabbos, in the first edition of Shmiur Shabbos, he quotes a heter. He quotes a heter in page 311, source 24. The fact that the cold water gets heated, less than ba, he passes like Rasi Pesach. Tavi psik reisha de loich baslei. The sharina midrabanan. The kivin the benko v'kol yelcha mayim miyad derech sino ros. Behem yischam koach ha'esh. So the earlier Shlomo Shmiur Shabbos paskin l'kula like the Hartzvi, but later on, the Shmiur Shabbos in the later edition says no, because there are sometimes people use their dud not just through the shemesh, but they use electricity, so it's very confusing. This water was heated by the sun, this water was heated by the electric, so it's very confusing, and therefore the Shmiur Shabbos paskins one should not use it. Quoting from Rav Shlomo Zalman, Shamadi begonim Shlomo Zalman Oyerbach v'nimu koimo. The kivan chish makomo, since there are places shab mitkan muf'al mikoach hachashma miyamim ma'onanim. On the cloudy days, the sun's not going to help you, so you have to use the electricity. Chayshin and shema yavo lahosi miyayim midura shemesh gam bezman hashum muf'al b'chashmal, and therefore it's very possible and probable that one could make a mistake, and therefore one shouldn't use it. Rimalamed says we're in a situation of need. Maybe one can shasat chak. One can, especially maybe Friday night for sure, because Friday night there's not going to be any more sun till the next morning, so it's for sure lo nichale. So this is a major machlokas. So again, lamaisa. Cooking in the sun, ein derech bishul b'kach. The Gemara says mutter, but is that because it's not normal? But if it would be normal, it would be Asud Araisa. That's where Moshe Feinstein by the microwaves, and that's the Shmiur Shabbos by the heating system. Or do we say Indirach Bishul means the nif'al, the result is different? That was the Eglei Tal. Rav Shlomo Zalman felt there's no difference because look at heating up water. He doesn't think that's a problem. But Rav Shlomo Zalman is the one that says that no, Indirach Bishul means it's defined. It's defined that it needs fire, and sun is not Derech Bishul. And therefore it would not be Daraisa to cook in the microwave. It would not be Daraisa to cook in the sun. But again, Lamaisa, or Shlomo Zalman answered it anyway because of the Gzeira, you might get confused with Chashmal. Okay, so that is all next Yesod about Bishul. So we spoke about the first point of what is the definition of Bishul for liquids. We said Yatso Ledisbo. Number 2, we spoke about cooking in the sun. That definitionally cooking in the fire is Bishul, not cooking in the sun. What if you cook in the sun? We saw. Good. What does Bishul apply to something that is already cooked? Right, this gets into issues which we'll talk more about hopefully in the future about bishul achar bishul. Once something is cooked already, let's something is edible. Oh, we'll get to this. I'll mention it now, but hopefully we'll get to it in the future. We mentioned that the shiur for cooking for liquids is yatso ledisbo. What about for solids? So that, as we'll see, is ma'achol ben drusai. Once I make something edible from raw to edible, so that is going to be the isser da'oraisa of cooking solids on Shabbos. Even less than that might be chatzi shiur. The Shmiur Shabbos does quote that maybe chatzi shiur is also from the Torah. Even before I get to Machol Ben Drusai, right? That's the Ben Drusai was a bandit. They always used to eat on the run. So once you make it edible, that's called Machol Ben Drusai. Machlokas Rashi and the Rambam, whether that's a half cooked or a third cooked, that's a Machlokas Rishonim. But either way, making it edible. We'll see soon. There is a Machlokas Rishonim. What about going from Machol Ben Drusai to fully cooked? Is that the oraisa? So we'll see a machlokas between the Rambam and the Rashba about that. But what happens if something is cooked? Let's say it's fully cooked, and I want to reheat it. Am I allowed to reheat it? Is that called bishul da'araisa? Bishul achar bishul. Is that a problem? So the Mishnah seems to tell us, so page 314 now, the Mishnah seems to say that it's mutter. Kol sheba b'chamin me'erev Shabbos, shor noso b'chamin b'Shabbos. Whatever is cooked before Shabbos, ba b'chamin, came in hot water. But that means that whatever was cooked on before Shabbos, then you're allowed to cook it again on Shabbos. So that's the Mishnah seems to say it's mutter. The problem is in the sugya of hatmana, which we're not getting into right now, but that's the Issa D'Rabbanan of insulation. There's insulation on Shabbos, before Shabbos. The Gemara says one of the reasons you can't insulate is because you might come to Gzera Shema Yartiach. The Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph in source 29. If you insulate, you might come to heat up again. Heat up again. I thought it's mutter to heat up again. How could the Mishnah say in Shabbos, Perach Beis, Kosher Baba Chavim Me'erev Shabbos, Shonas Baba Chavim B'Shabbos, which sounds like it's mutter to reheat, while the Mishnah said, the Gemara says in Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph, Gzeira Shema Yartiach, which sounds like it's a problem to reheat. So that is a major machlokas Rishonim. Says the Rosh, it depends if it's liquid or solid. Liquid or solid. When it comes to liquid, Yesh Bishul Achar Bishul. Yesh Bishul Achar Bishul Balach. When it comes to moist, something liquid, Yesh Bishul Achar Bishul Balach. And therefore, if I have a soup that is fully cooked, can't take it and put it on the hot plate. Can't take it. Forgetting the Durabanans, but the Daraisas maybe. Yesh Bishul Achar Bishul Balach. Says and that's the Gemara in Shabbos. Right, the Gemara, the Mishnah in Shabbos, Perach Beis, that's talking about solids. Solids, midaraisa, if I have a kugel, that I take the kugel out, it's fully cooked, I can put it on a heat source, there's no Bishul Daraisa there. That's the Rosh's Chilik in source number 30. In the third parak in Shabbos, Lamadnu, Sha'af b'tavshel shenis bashel v'nitz tanein shayach be bishul. Even something that's cooked and is cooled off, there's still shayach bishul, kivan sheyesh bo mashke, because it has liquid. What about that Mishnah? By something dry. Something dry ain't bishul acha bishul. Umistavra, and then he adds, this will be important for later, but let's just look at it right now. Until it gets to Machlo Ben Drusai, as long as you're getting it closer to Machlo Ben Drusai, that's heading towards the Issa Daraisa Bishul. And after it gets to Machlo Ben Drusai, if it's cooled off and you heat it up again, Chayev, the Rosh says, you're still Chayev. So that's the Rosh. The Rosh says the Chilik is between liquids and solids. The Tur accepts the Chilik between liquids and solids, but we'll see, he is machmir, like the Rambam that says even after Machlo Ben Drusai, there is potential Bishul Daraisa. Says the Tur, Siman Shin Yud Ches. Remember, all this is Siman Shin Yud Ches and Bishul. Afilu Tavshel Shenis Bashel Kfar Yesh Bo Mishum Bishul Im Nitztanin Kfar. Right? If it's already cooked, there's still bishul if it was cooled off. But we'll get to skip a line right immediately. But if it's liquidy, if it's liquid, let's say. But if it's solid, there is no bishul. But along the way, he also said, "V'imlon is bashal called sarcho." If it wasn't mavushal called sarcho, even if it was machlo ben drusai, bishul da'araisa is still possible, and we're machmir. We're machmir for that, as we will see. Why is there a difference between liquids and solids? So explain the Mefarshim. The Shabur explains in source 32. When it comes to a solid, I've used a kugel. Once I made a kugel, it's kugel. So if I heat it up, it's kugel. It's not kugel. It's nothing changed. So once it became kugel, it's done. Once it became chicken, it's done. Liquid, cold soup. Nobody eats cold soup, right? When you make it hot, you're like kind of making it food again. And therefore, it's different. To B'davar Lach, says the Mishnah Brura, Kivan da'azal chamimuso. Once it lost its heat for its tani and it cooled off, batel mimenu shem bishula harishon. The first bishul is no longer in effect. And therefore, that would be the problem. The Rambam, interestingly, is not machalek between solids and liquids, but as we said before, he is machmir regarding bishul. He's machmir regarding bishul daraisa. There's bishul daraisa even after machlo ben drusai, all the way up to mavushal kol tzarcho. From edible to fully cooked, the Rambam says there is bishul daraisa. That's the Rambam in Hilchot Shabbos and Perek Tes in source number 33. Hamavashal al or davar shay mavushal called sarcho. Only if it's mavushal called sarcho, you're putter. But up until that point, you'd be chayiv. But he's not machal between solids and liquids. And therefore, I will see the Rambam is meiko l'chora by omission. There's no bishul achar bishul. Once something is cooked, it's cooked. And even by liquids, one would be able to reheat it, as we will see. The Rashba also, in Shabbat Yud Ches, holds like the Rambam, that once something, there's not machalik between solids and liquids, but he's meko regarding bishul daraisa, after machlo ben drusai. V'od yesh li lomar, says the Rashba, dekol debashal kamachlo ben drusai, leka mishum mekis. There's no issue of stirring, which we'll have to get to, but Hashem, which is a part of the bishul process. To mekis mishum mavashal to mechayev. V'kivish yigil machol ben drusai leka mishum mavashal. So Lamaisa, there is a chiluk between solids and liquids when it comes to reheating, and there is a machlokas about when is bishul daraisa. Is it, again, by liquids to make it yatzo ledespo, that's daraisa. By solids, to make it machol ben drusai is daraisa. What about going from machol ben drusai to mevushal kol tzarcho? That's the machlokas between the Rashba and the Rambam. The Rashba is mekel, the Rambam is machmir. We assume lechumra in both of these shilas. We assume lechumra in both of these shilas. Meaning, we're machmir for bishul daraisa from machol ben drusai to mevushal kol tzarcho, and we're machmir that there is bishul achar bishul when it comes to liquids. Unlike the Rambam that says there's no bishul achar bishul period, but the Rambam we say that. The Rambam does say, the Eglei Tal says that even the Rambam would agree to water. You want to say soup is soup once it's cooked, and even if it's cold, it's still soup. But water, you heated up water, and now the water is cold, then for sure even the Rambam would agree. Says the Eglei Tal in source 35. Lashon HaRambam. Hamavash l'sasamanim ha'machamir samayim chayiv. Kivan demikol makom mashma demayim lo shayach when lashon bishul. Elo lashon chimum. V'chimumo hu bishulo. Heating up water is the cooking of the water. It doesn't change. Kamo ataches hamanteches. Ukshenitztanin vazle bishulo chayiv shenis al bishulo. Says the Eglei Tal. Even the Rambam would agree by water, but not by others. So, as I said before, we're machmer in both regards. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Shid Yirches Sif Dalid. Tav shel shenis bashal kol tzarcho. Yesh bo mishum bishul emitztani. We paskin machlokas we shown him about bishul achar bishul achar afiyah. We'll get to, but there is bishul achar bishul if it cooled off. If it is liquid. If it is liquid, and if it's machol ben drusai only, then for sure even by solids. If it wasn't fully cooked, even if it was cooked machol ben drusai, shayach bo bishul, it's still shayach bo bishul, even if it's burning hot. If it didn't get to mavushal kol tzarcha, we'll get to. If somebody wants to take some cholent off and then put it back, as we'll learn about the halachas, if it's not fully cooked, you cannot take the cholent pot off, because then when you put it back, you're going to be cooking. So it has to be fully cooked. We paskin bishul achar bishul only by liquid. Avodavish and his bashal kfar v'u yavish, but if it's dry, mutter lishroso. The Ramah does add, famous Ramah. The Ramah says even by liquids, that there is bishul achar bishul by liquids, that's only if nitztanin legamrei. That's only if it's fully cooled off. If it's still warm, then there's no bishul achar bishul, even by liquids. That's the Ramah in Shin Yuches Sif Tezvav. See there in source number 37. V'yesh bekilin lomar to kol she'ein nosno agabe esho akir mamash rachsamach lo afilin. It's that's for durabanan purposes. Afilin nitztanin mutter v'nagu lahakel bazem lo nitztanin legamrei. As long as it didn't get fully cooled off. We're going to get to, but in the future. Let's say you want to have a second cup of tea. You still have a couple of drops on the bottom. As long as it's not fully cold, it's still a little warm, it is okay. You don't have to worry about it. The Chazon Ish says, because me'ikir adin, Chazon explains the Ramah, me'ikir adin, we pass like the Rambam. Ein bishul achar bishul, period. But we're machmir, and therefore, as long as it's not totally fully cooked, fully cold, which is basically room temperature, so then it is still okay and mutter. That's what the Chazon Ish says in Siman Lamed Zayin in source number 38. V'yim me'ikir adin, ein shum makom lachalek. Really, what difference should it make whether it totally cooled off or not? If it's not yatzol ledesbo, it's cold. What's nistan legamri? Why should that make a difference? So he says, really, al karach shanatos and liquor adin kadas Rambam. Really, we pass like the Rambam and the Rashba and others. Ein bishul achar bishul, period. Ela mipnei shelo yavo lahakel b'chayim lo noagu lahakel b'tzoni shen chamimusoni karas. Right, it has to have some type of warmth that is left. Rav Moshe says, as long as it's warm enough that you would drink it, and it's still considered not cold. Rav Moshe says, Shira chamimos shetzorach lios balach laharama hu sheroy lechol le'elu sherotzim lechol chamin. If you want to have warm tea, hot tea, you still drink it. It's a little bit warm. If it's totally cold, you want to drink it, so then that's already nitztanein legamri. Good. So this is the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, and just as a summary, the Aruch Shabbos in source 41 summarizes everything we've said now about reheating. Again, this is all within the world of Bishul Daraisa, Bishul Darabanan, how you put things on the hot plate and on the blech and on the pots and on the cholent pot. So that's going to be within the world of Bishul Darabanan. But Bishul Daraisa, right? So is there Bishul Daraisa once something is fully cooked already? So we say yes by liquids if it has cooled off. By solids, if it's fully cooked, there is no Bishul Achar Bishul. So that's all summarized here in source 41. Let's read some of it. If something is already cooked, edible, machol ben drusoi, machlokas Rashi Rambam, half cooked or a third cooked, kol shadayin lo nisbashal legamrei, aser lahosa bishul. If it's not fully cooked, you're not allowed to cook it more. You can't put it on the fire. That's bishul daraisa. Avol machol shenisbashal kol tzarcho. But if it's fully cooked, there's no iser daraisa bishul. Even if it gets better by overnight, more cooking, but it's still. Misamik v'yafalo does not make it the aser. Avim tosefet bishul mashbichoso makes it better. V'ubegeder b'sayk v'yafalo, still that is okay. Lachen yesh lihi zaher b'kdir sheish bo machol. Shadayin lo nespashal kol tzarcho. It's not mavushal kol tzarcho. You can't touch it. You can't stir it. You can't put the cover on. Just leave it. Aval. If it's fully cooked, you could add on a cover or to bring it closer to the fire because it's fully cooked. It's fully cooked. You can take it off the fire and put it back on the fire in the way that it is mutter, as B'ez Hashem we will learn about. And then he says, Otiyutes, if it's dry, there's no bishul, even if it's totally cold. Piece of chicken, schnitzel, anything cold from the fridge can be taken out and mida oraisa warmed up and made hot. But if it is wet, if it is moist, davar lach, it says on the top of page 321, Tanu davar nozli, liquid, shehatafshel, hispashel v'tztanin, yesh lahavchin bo b'shnei matzavim, k'psaka ramah. If it was nistanin legamre, totally cold, then you can't warm it up. Also, taking soup out of the refrigerator to warm it up to make it yaso ledisbo, that's usr. We'll see for Ashkenazim and even for Sephardim, most Sephardim. Im lo it's ani lagamre, but if it didn't get totally cold off, even though it's not yaso ledisbo, but it's still a little warm, then there is no isser of reheating. The Rambam, if you remember, held ein bishul achar bishul period. He didn't mention the chiluk of liquids. Meaning, according to the Rambam, you could take soup out of the fridge and warm it up to yaso ledisbo. Right, ein bishul achar bishul, and the Rambam passes that way. The Shulchan Aruch does not, but the Rambam passes that way. And certain Yemenite Jews, as we know, sometimes based on going back generations, many of the minhagim of Teiman, they go like the Rambam, going back to the Igeris Teiman, where he gave them chizik. So that is mutter for the Yemenite Jews if they have that Mesorah. If I'm in a house where the Teimani people have that minhag, I could eat the soup. I can't put it on, but I could eat the soup. That's what Rabbi Malamed says in source 42. Many go like the Rambam. You cooked an Erev Shabbos, you put it in the refrigerator. Mutter b'Shabbos lo tziyah ma'im makarer. You can take it out. You can boil it up again. Right, and even if somebody who holds like the Shulchan Aruch is eating in their house, he says in the continuation, it would be allowed. The Rav Sion Bishul writes in it makom tzarech, one can warm up cooked food in a place where it could get the yatso ledisbo, as long as you're going to watch it. Remember, we had before the machlokas Rashi and Tosfos whether you can put something in a place where it could get the yatso ledisbo, even though you're not planning to leave it there, you're planning to take it off. So we paskin l'chumra there, like Tosfos. But says Rabbi Tzionah Bishul, if this situation where it's already a chumrah because Maker did maybe we pass like the Rambam in bishul achar bishul, so if you want to warm up the liquid to make it warm and not boiling hot, so maybe that would be mutter, and we can paskin like Rashi in this situation. Mikom makom, he says, source 43. Benidon didon sheish bo machlokas. There's already a machlokas about the bishul achar bishul. Shelo dasa Rambam ein bishul achar bishul afilu b'davar lach. Yishlosarif bazeh you can put together with Rashi. Where Mishnah Berurah is not a fan of that. Mishnah Berurah says Ashkenazim should not put it in the heat source. In that case, again, Makom Sarah Gadol, Rav Yashiv is Mekel, but generally one shouldn't be Mekel. Rav Avadia says one could ask a non-Jew. one could ask a non-Jew, because the whole thing is based on a machlokes. So if it's a machlokes, you could rely on a non-Jew, says the Rav Avadia in source 44. So Nehi, even though Dana Chayshina L'Svaras HaChokim Ukapazak Maran Adei Nachri Miyah Havlei Savik L'Kula. So Rav Avadia is Mako in that regard, but we generally, the Ashkenazic poskim, the Bir Halacha, Piskei Teshuvos all quote that even there we assume it's also. We paskin Meikar Adin like the Lamaisa, like the other Shitas, not like the Rambam, and therefore one shouldn't ask a non-Jew to do it either. How do you determine Lach and Yavesh? What if one has wet meatballs? What if one has meatballs sitting in gravy? How does one determine Lach and Yavesh? So, if you look in the sources, there's two versions of what Rabbeinu Yerucham said. Right? Rabbeinu Yerucham quoted in source 46, in the original Rabbeinu Yerucham, one of the Rishonim, his lashon is Kol Davar Sheyesh Bo Rotev. If there's any liquid, Sheyesh Bo Rotev. Right? If you look in the Beis Yosef, when the Beis Yosef quotes Rabbeinu Yerucham, the Kol Sherubo Rotev. If most of it's Rotev. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, says it has to be totally dry. Tavshel Yavesh She'ein Bo Rotev Klal, in order for it to be called dry. So any wet meatballs or wet chicken or a greasy kugel, that would be a problem. Pashtus. It has some Rotev. But others say the Ksos HaShulchan, Rav Chaim Noah, and others say that even if it's a little moist, that's okay. As long as it's not sitting in a puddle. If it's sitting in a puddle, then that's lach, and yesh b'shalach abisha balach, if it's the sign in lagamre. But if something doesn't have to be totally wet, the language of the Mishnah Berurah is hu rak mimenu. Something was poured from it, but it still has some moisture. Rav Moshe said it's hard to know, like, what does a lot mean? What does a little mean? Rav Moshe in source number 50, ochel sharubo yavish miyut lach. It has a little bit of lach. Says Rav Moshe, lo muvan achilib in rov lach lemiyut lach. I don't understand. If there's lach, it's lach. Meaning, if it's sitting in a puddle, it's sitting in a puddle. But if it's not in a puddle, it's just wet, so that would be okay. That's how Rav Ribiyat also seems to have it on the top of 327. A davar yavish does not have to be totally dry in every sense. Even a moist food may be classified as davar yavish, as long as there's no significant accumulation of gravy or other liquid. And that's what he said. A cold roast chicken is davar yavish, even though the surface is moist with gravy or juices. Meat and meatballs, vegetables, cooked or roasted items are all davar yavish even when moist. It's only if there is meatballs in sauce, chicken, and soup, right? If it's sitting in a puddle of liquid, so that would be that's the only time when you will be considered lach. What about some things they're not sure? Lach yavish, ketchup, machlokas. Rav Moshe Feinstein assumes ketchup is liquid because it's pourable. Rav Shlomo Zalman felt no, it's closer to a solid, so therefore one should know about if one's machmir, as we'll learn about it. Let's say somebody's going to have a piece of chicken or a schnitzel that's boiling hot, you're going to put ketchup on it, so important to know whether it's lach or yavish. There's a machlokas just quoted on the last page here, 328, 329, about softening bones. If somebody likes to chew bones, so even if something is fully cooked, maybe it's not fully, the bones aren't fully cooked until you leave them hours and hours. So Rav Shlomo Zalman thought that if you're in a place where they want to eat the bones and make it soft, one should be machmir. But Rav Moshe thought that bones are not roy lachila, and therefore it shouldn't have an isser in that case. Okay, there's a lot more here. We're just getting started with Bishul, but that takes us through shiur number 7, the last one here in volume number 17. By the Shem, we're going to try to have one or two chazara shiurim over these next couple of weeks. Okay, we'll stop here.